Get healthy. Who wants to do that? That sounds like work to me. I am not Andrew. My name is Kyle Sommerfelt. Andrew has been a little sick this morning, so I am subbing for him this week. If you know me, you'll know most weeks I am hanging out with the kids at City North Kids. I have a blast with them. If you have a kid that goes to this church, chances are we've hung out before. And I'm really, really glad to speak to adults. Sometimes, kids are always great to hang out with, but sometimes you just need to talk to a grown-up. I think we can all understand that. If I haven't introduced myself, my name is Kyle Sommerfelt. Glad to be here today. Glad to try and sub for Andrew as much as I possibly can. Our current series is called Get Healthy. As soon as I hear that, I just feel guilty, and I just feel like it's like I have a list with something that's not crossed off on it. I feel like I got to form some new habits. It just, that sounds like a lot of work. But it's something we think about every January, don't we? Like, January is such an easy time to be thinking about, what does my new routine look like, right? You know, we just got off 2 straight months, holidays, where like there really isn't too much routine. You might be traveling. Things might be kind of weird with holidays. You might like need to be shopping for holidays. Your given week might look completely different than the week you just had. Whereas when you hit January, things start kind of looking the same. So if you want to move your schedule around to make sure that you have exercise time, it's a good time to start that. If you want to say, dietarily, I'm doing this right now, it's a great time to start that when there aren't as many occasions behind it. January is a great time to take a look at your life and start asking yourself questions about getting healthy. Start asking yourself questions about, what does the healthiest version of myself kind of look like? This is easier for some people than others, as you can kind of tell by how much I'm complaining about it as I'm talking to you right now. Let me do it this way. A lot of people talk about, it's very easy to separate people into groups of people, and here I am, I'm going to do it too. I think a lot of people are either past-oriented people, present-oriented people, or future-oriented people. I think a lot of the way our brains work and the way we process goals and the way we process things in our lives are how we orient to that. And I want to just make it really clear. I want to do a show of hands for like each of those 3 groups, but I want to make it really clear before I do that. I don't believe one is better than the other. I believe all of those have upsides and downsides. And I think some of them have strengths where others have weaknesses, reinforcing once again, we need each other. You know, we all make each other better. But I want to kind of think about that really quick, and it will drive to a point. I want to do it backwards. If you feel like your brain thinks about the future more than the other two, why don't you raise your hand real quick? Who thinks they're future-oriented mostly? All right. I saw my friend Scott do this. This is also a very good answer, because chances are you're not all the way in one or the other. That's I'm glad he did that. Who thinks that they're predominantly present-focused? You think about today and today only. You don't think about the past. You don't think about the future. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Where are my past people? That's me, hands down, for sure. Okay, yeah, totally get that. I'm big-time past-oriented. So all these things have strengths and weaknesses. Future-oriented people are really good at making lists and making goals and dreaming. Sometimes they are doomed to make the same mistakes they've always made because they're not thinking about the past very much and not thinking, have I done this before? Don't worry about it. There's something cool out there. I'm going to go that way, which is a great thing. It's got a lot of benefits. It's got some drawbacks. Present-oriented people, same thing. Present-oriented people are really, really good at trusting their gut. My gut got me here. Something just doesn't feel right, and usually their gut ends up being right. My sister is very gut-oriented, very present-oriented. These are also very people who can forgive themselves very quickly because they're just in the moment. We can move on and we can move forward. Sometimes they can be accused of having tunnel vision, though. Today's the only day that ever mattered. Very much Dory in Finding Nemo, if you remember that. Like, today is all that's happening right now. Past-oriented people, and I speak from experience, you can often paralyze yourself with things that have happened in the past. You can be so obsessed with mistakes and shortcomings that you don't try anything. And you end up locking yourself in your house and not thinking about anything except for the worst thing that could possibly happen. The thing that we can do is past-oriented people keep data really well. We have reasons for the things that we do. We explain the things that we do. That we do. Sometimes when people don't want us to explain those things. So that's kind of like the balance between all of those. Because I'm a past-oriented person, I think the reason I struggle with Januaries the most is I can't dream about the best version of myself. I don't see it. I don't see it in the future. I also can't just enjoy what's happening to me right now. You know what I'm thinking about in January? I think about all the really garbage meals I ate in December. Thinking about all of the sweets. I'm thinking about all of the family meals where I ate too much. I'm thinking about all those things. And my only motivation is to undo something from my past. That's the way my brain works. I'm not saying this is healthy. I'm actually saying the opposite. But I think that's the way I think of when I think of January. So this morning was a really weird morning. I was woken up by my wife who said, Andrew's sick, you're speaking today. All right, I love it. I work under pressure. This is great. I don't. So I got that news and I thought about it, and this has happened before sometimes. I'm kind of the bullpen guy sometimes, like if someone's struggling out there, if something's going on, I'm comfortable enough. I've done a lot of public speaking before. I've done a lot of messages before. I'm usually the person who gets called for that, and I'm glad to help out in that regard. So this morning, I'm just kind of trying to brainstorm and trying to think about what to do. I pull up Andrew's notes, and the first thing I see is the name of the series, which is Get Healthy. And I had the reaction I had when I got up here, which is, oh man, get healthy. I don't want to do that. And immediately, I'm thinking about all of December's meals and how January's meals have to be better. Immediately, I'm thinking about that. Immediately, I'm guilt-tripping myself. Immediately, I'm making myself feel bad. And I share that with you because I'm willing to bet not just the past-oriented people in here, but I'm willing to bet some of that resonates with you guys a little bit. When you think about a big resolution or a big goal, maybe there's someone in here who sometimes their brain immediately goes to past failures or past mistakes or how to undo them or how to be better than them. And maybe you immediately are guilt-tripping yourself. Maybe you're immediately making yourself feel bad about those things. The second thing I noticed when I was looking at Andrew's notes is that one of the things he's doing in this series about Get Healthy is he's presenting a lie and presenting a truth that overcomes that lie. And I laughed out loud when I saw that because I've known Andrew for about 6 years. Andrew loves getting a lie in his crosshairs and killing it. That's like his thing. He loves that. He loves saying that's a lie in your life. He loves hearing something from you and going, well, that's not true, right? That's something in the years I've known him has always been a great positive of his. He loves finding the lies that we tell ourselves and tell each other and then annihilating them into non-existence. He loves to do that. That's something he's very passionate about. So to see a series where he's doing that, I was like, all right, even if I'm speaking this, I already feel like Andrew's kind of here. So a couple weeks ago, I was actually stressed out about something in my life, and I was kind of worried about, I don't know how I'm going to handle this big change that might happen in my life. And I talked to Andrew about it, and immediately I was saying, I've never succeeded in this area. I've always struggled with this kind of situation. I'm really bad at this. And I'm telling him all these things that are going to be really bad if this change happens. And he just looks back at me and he goes, Kyle, you just said 3 things that aren't true. This isn't true. This isn't true. This isn't true. And again, it's what he's good at. It's how his brain works. It's a positive that he has. And it just is a reminder to me that it's so important to have friendships where you have someone in your life who can say, look, I love you. What you said is not true. You need to be convinced of your own self-worth. You need to be convinced of your own flexibility. You need to be convinced of your own ability to roll with the punches and the ability to have successes where all you see is failures. That's such an important thing. And I think that's so much of what this series is all about. A lie and then what destroys that lie. And the lie I want to talk about this week is one I've already started talking to you about and one that I think we've all said to ourselves at one point. And it's something I might have a PhD in saying, which is I can't. The lie is, I can't. They might put it on my gravestone when I die. They might say, Kyle Sommerfeld, he said he can't. And because that's how much I say it, that's how I'm a natural self-limiter. I think a lot of past-oriented people do that. I think it's really, really easy to go, hey, I tried this once and I failed it, so I'm never gonna do it again. Which, of course, is ridiculous, because who is good at something the first time they do it? Very, very, very few of us. And if you are, just get out of here. It's not you're making us all feel bad. No, I'm just kidding. Some people are naturals, but I think a lot of us aren't. A lot of us really struggle the first time we try something. And if we fail really, really, really bad at something, it's a really great motivator to never try that again, and maybe not even ever try anything new again. We don't like feeling failure. We don't like that. When you find something that you love doing even when it's hard, and when you love doing even when you fail at it, that's a really good sign because it means you're going to stick with it. But I think a lot of us, when we run headfirst at something as hard as we can and work really hard and slam into a wall, that's a lesson to us. Oh, I'm not going to do that again anymore. And we start making up I can'ts, and we start making up scenarios of our own limitations, of the reasons that we're weak, of the reasons that we're flawed, of the reasons that we can't overcome those things. And if we're talking about health, we're talking about get healthy, get mentally healthy, get physically healthy, get spiritually healthy. Chances are that's something that happens all the time in those different avenues. Maybe you tried to wake up and exercise every morning and it got boring or it got exhausting or you got hurt and you don't want to do it again and get hurt again. Maybe you try to eat healthy for a while, but that was really boring and that was unexciting, and you started hating your meals, and then you started guilt eating, and then like that just kind of ruined everything. What about spiritually? Maybe you set aside time in the morning to read your Bible and pray every day, and you kept falling asleep, or you felt like you were talking to yourself when you were praying, or you'd read the Bible and not really understand what was there and give up on it. And you would try all of these different habits, and then failure hits you, and immediately you're like, I can't. This phrase, I can't, is something I am all too familiar with. And if you're anything like me, I bet you feel that as well. I bet you go through that as well. It's a lie we tell ourselves. It's something we tell ourselves to use the past to inform our future decisions. If I failed once, I will fail every time. And of course, Aunt Andrew here, he would do his best to stomp that out because it's not true. It's not true. In terms of health, this is something I do all the time. It's something, a limit I place on myself. It's something I think about. Andrew had made a list this morning when I was reading it of other can'ts that some of us say to ourselves. I can't get past the hurt. See, this is an interesting one because this isn't about like guilt. This is about maybe a trauma or something bad that happened in our past or a broken relationship that we have. I can't get past what I've done. That was what I was talking about. I am so guilty. I am so weak. I am so broken. I can't get past that. I can't forgive. That's a huge one. How many of us have our lives driven by a grudge that we're holding or an old debt that we're owed that we can't forget about? That's a huge one. I can't forgive. Even worse, I can't forgive myself. I am messed up. I am screwed up. God doesn't want me here. God doesn't want me on his team. These people don't want me on their team. I've screwed up too much to possibly qualify for God's team. That's one I feel all the time. I'll never be able to move on. You have this one seminal moment that you think about all the time where you made the big mistake, where you beefed it when it mattered most. And no matter how far you get in the future, it'll always come back to that mistake. You'll never be able to escape that mistake you made. I felt that, and I'm willing to believe that there's someone else in here who probably feels that as well. I'll never be able to let go. I'll never be able to let go. Maybe you had the life you wanted. Maybe you had it really, really good, and it got taken away from you. And you cannot move past that. You cannot embrace the new chapter of your life. You cannot find happiness in a new dimension of your life because you can't let go. These are can'ts that we say all the time. These are self-limits that we put on ourselves all the time. These are ideas and principles that are driven by that word can't. It's driven by a limitation. It's driven by the areas in our lives that we want to get back, or the areas in our lives that we want to attain and can't get towards. Again, you've got past, you've got present, you've got future. No matter what kind of person you are, no matter how you orient yourself, chances are this word can't comes up in some capacity. And it's a scary thing, and it's a difficult thing to overcome and to understand. There's something I've always learned when it has come to can't, is that it always shows up most when I'm about to try something new. Is anyone else like that? Right when you're about to like step out, and right when you're about to take a risk, and right when you're about to do something that's outside of your comfort zone, that's when all the can'ts come up. You can't do this for this reason. You can't do this for this reason. You can't do this for this reason. For me personally, a lot of that is fueled by my depression. I think if you've ever heard me speak before, you've probably heard me say I'm as open as I can be about the fact that I have depression. I've gone to counseling. Our church is very pro-counseling. We believe it's for everyone. We believe everyone can benefit from it. We believe mental health is just like any other kind of health, and that it's a very, very difficult thing to process by yourself, and it really, really helps to go to professionals and help with that. We really are very passionate about that. And my life is a testimony to that. There were so many things in my life that I wasn't dealing with maturely before counseling that I was able to deal with when I was able to truly call out depression and call out the way that was manifesting in myself. And whether you have depression or not, chances are sometimes you just look at yourself in the mirror and you go, that guy sucks, or that girl sucks, or that person sucks. If you're anything like me, you've done that at least once to yourself. Maybe even this week. Maybe even today you woke up and you're like, I don't love that person very much. I've been there. I've beaten myself up a lot. I've beaten myself up worse than any other person has beaten me up. I'm my own worst critic by far. And chances are, I'm willing to bet you guys might be too. For me, so much of that has to deal with relationships I've had in the past that have ended earlier than I wanted them to, and me thinking there's something wrong with me that person doesn't want to be around me anymore. And that's not just breakups, that's just the context of relationships and the context of growing up. My counselor would always talk about on-ramps and off-ramps. That was a big thing we worked on all the time, where someone will enter the highway with you and drive with you for a while, and it's really great, and it's really special, and it's really awesome, and then naturally you guys grow apart. And I used to always think, well, there's no reason we should ever grow apart, right? Like on-ramps are great, but why do we need off-ramps? We'll just hang out together the entire time. But it doesn't work like that. The context of these relationships will change, and then they'll go off in another direction, but it gives you the opportunity and time and energy and resources for new relationships, which are also healthy and good and mature. And I was living so much of my life being sad that I didn't have the relationships that I had, especially in college, not grasping that I had so many special relationships now in my life that were treasured and valuable that I wouldn't have had the time for if those other relationships had stuck around. There's a give and take. There's an on-ramp and an off-ramp. And that was a healthy thing for me to kind of understand. Another thing I worked on a lot in counseling is how I see myself, that conversation I have in the mirror. And we worked on self-talk. Maybe you guys have heard about self-talk before. It's like the mental thing you say to yourself at different points in the day. And how that started for me is my counselor really challenged me. How do you talk to yourself when you make a mistake? In the moment when you've done something and you've made a mistake, how do you talk to yourself? And it's an even better test is if it's something kind of silly that you probably should have known better. Like you get all the way upstairs and forget that you needed a tool that's all the way in the basement, like something really, really silly where you're like, I just should have known better. What's your first reaction? How do you talk to yourself? What's the sentence that comes to your mind? For me, it's always, what a dummy, you forgot that. That was the first thing I thought of. How could you forget that? Only a dumb person would make the mistake you just made. That was the first instinct. Now, I'll be really clear. It wasn't like, I hate you, Kyle, for forgetting the hammer in the basement. It wasn't that. What it was you are a dummy because you did a thing dummies do. That was the thing I said in my mind. Now, that's mostly a joke. That's mostly like to cheer myself up, and it's mostly just for me to embrace the silliness of it. But the phrasing of that makes a really, really big difference, doesn't it? I'm not saying, oh, you did a silly thing or you forgot something. I'm saying you are a dummy. And if you think those two things are the same, I really, really want to push back on that. Saying I made a mistake and saying I'm a stupid person are two very different things. And one is a very healthy way to talk about it in your head, and one is a very judgmental, detrimental way to talk about it in your head. And one of the first things my counselor focused in on was, how do you talk to yourself when you make a mistake? Now, this is not a counseling session. Don't take it from me. I am not a trained counselor. I am no substitute for your own counseling experience. I'm just sharing this with you because it was something that helped me, and maybe there's someone in here who it will help as well. But learning how to talk to yourself starts with how you talk to yourself when you're being critical. And then it kind of moves on from that. When you start looking at those scenarios where you're starting a new project or you're doing something new and the I can't start running into your head, how do you see yourself in those scenarios? Are you only thinking about the limitations? Or are you thinking about your capabilities as well? Are you manifesting an image of yourself for that occasion that is unhealthy or unrealistic? I know I've done that. And it's something that I think I had to get over before I could even talk about other aspects of my mental health that really needed a lot of attention. A lot of times, something I do is disqualify myself before the start of it. So about 5 years ago, I decided to make like a big career change. I was working in a warehouse, really loved my job there. It was good. But there was something new that I thought I'd be good at, and I kind of enjoyed learning about. I was self-teaching myself online and really kind of enjoying it. It's mostly related to web development and coding, and I won't get too deep into it because a lot of people are already not listening because that's just boring as can be for some people. And so I started to self-teach myself, and as I was self-teaching, I was like, oh, I love this. Like, this is fun to me. Even if I'm bad at this, I'm having fun doing it, which, like I said earlier, that's a good sign that you found something you really like. When you're bad at it, you don't immediately give up. So I was processing that, and I was thinking about that, and I was really enjoying it. And I started self-sabotaging already because my brain was thinking, you need to change everything. You need to quit your job. The plan was to quit my job and wake up every day and just teach myself to code every day until I get a job, and then network and do all these other things with it. But like, if you know me, I'm a very risk-averse person. I do not like risks. I do not like trying new things. I do not like putting myself out there. I don't like any of those things. And I am someone who will always stay in the safe zone as long as it's working for me and never reach for something better than what I have. I am as boring and vanilla and as risk-averse as you can possibly be. So I start asking people in my life about this big change I'm considering. And what I'm really doing is I'm hoping someone's going to tell me what a bad idea it is. I'm hoping someone's gonna say, Kyle, you got a decent job, stick with it. Or Kyle, you're getting by okay. A lot of people don't even have that. Why shake anything up? You've got a pretty good thing going. I'm waiting for people to say that. And I talked to my mom. Well, my mom thinks I'm perfect. My mom can't possibly think of a thing wrong with me. That was a mistake. She's gonna say I can do anything. She thinks I could end up working for NASA. Like, she thinks I could do anything. I talked to a couple of my friends, and most of them kind of say the same thing. And already I'm doing what I always do, and you guys can probably relate to this a little bit. They're complimenting me, and I'm like, no, they're wrong. Like they're saying, no, you can do this, and I'm like, they don't know anything about me. Have you ever argued with a compliment? Does anybody else do that? It's hard, isn't it? Like, getting a compliment's a really difficult thing to do. You either argue with it, you deflect it, or you accept it, but in your mind you're going, they don't know me. Like you're mentally in the frame of mind that they don't know enough about me to compliment me. Okay, really wise advice I got a long time ago. What is the correct response to a compliment, everybody? Anyone know? It's exactly what it is. It's not thank you, but it's not that person's better than me. It's not, oh, you don't really understand this part. It's also not, you're right, I'm really great. It's none of those things, okay? The correct response to a compliment is thank you. If someone is spending the energy and time and thought to say something kind about you, they're giving you a gift. And the worst thing you can do is deflect a gift away. Because they crafted it with their mind and words with you in mind. They handcrafted something for you. And take it from me as a person who works with kids every week. If a kid hands you a drawing and you have no clue what they drew, you say thank you. If a kid hands you a drawing, the last thing you say is, I don't get it. Can you explain this to me? The last thing you say is, oh, cool, I'm gonna give this to my mom. No, they made it for you, okay? So if someone handcrafts a gift for you, like a compliment, the correct response is thank you. And that's easier said than done. That's something I've had to learn the hard way. So I'm going through all these friends about this career change. I'm talking to all these people. And then it hits me. I know what I need to do. I need to talk to my dad about it. You know why? My dad is more risk averse than me. My dad doesn't take risks. He plays it safe. Me and my dad had a very bad relationship for a long time. We're doing a lot better now. But he's always been someone who I always expect to hit me with reality sometimes, He often struggles like I do with seeing the bright side of things. He often focuses on the negative the way I do. And I was like, this is what I'll do. I'll talk to my dad. As soon as I tell my dad I'm gonna quit my job with nothing else lined up, he'll be like, are you crazy? Like, this will work out really perfect. So my dad's over at dinner. I'm talking to him about it. I'm just kind of processing it. And he's just eating. Like, he's just eating as I'm talking, which is weird for him. He's got not so good hearing. So if you've ever had a friend who has bad hearing, eye contact is super important to them because they're reading your lips. And my dad, whenever he's listening, is usually very much eye contact. And he's just eating as I'm talking about this. And I get to the end of it, and I just go, well, what do you think? And I'll never forget this. This is I've had a really rough relationship with my dad, and this is the best moment with my dad I've ever had. He stops, he looks up, not at me, but at the wall. He puts his fork down, and then he turns to me, and he goes, Kyle, I've always been convinced you can do whatever you want to do. My doubting, conservative, risk-averse father just looks me in the eyes and tells me exactly what I want to hear. What I don't want to hear in that scenario, really. What I need to hear but don't want to hear. He says, I believe you can do whatever you want to do. And I just needed that. I needed the person in my life I was sure was going to talk me out of it to tell me you can do this. And it worked out. It was the right decision for me. My life has been a lot better because I made that change. For years, I thought it's not possible to enjoy your work. I'd watch my wife, who works in the library and loves it, go to work every day and come back tired and exhausted and frustrated, but loving what she does. And I thought, cool, some people can have jobs where they really love and believe in what they do. I'll work in a warehouse. That's fine. And now I love what I do. But I may have never done that if I didn't have people who saw me for how I really was instead of me eye-canting myself to death. Because even in that process, when I was thinking about the big risk and the big next step, I was already eye-canting in my mind over and over and over and over. And I needed people who did know me, no matter how much I deflected their compliments away in my brain, to tell me, you can do this, I believe in you. And that was so valuable to me, to have someone that believed in that, in me like that. There are a lot of verses in the Bible that deal with this idea of depression and this idea of being frustrated and this idea of heaviness that you can feel whether you're trying something new or not. But people who might be burdened by their past a little bit. Let's look at a couple of those verses. The first one's in Matthew. Matthew 5. I'll move out of the way a little bit so you can see it a little better. This is Matthew 5, verse 4. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. That's kind of a weird one because mourning is like something we picture someone doing sadly and something that no one is going to want to like prefer to do. But Jesus, and this is actually in like the opening of his big long sermon, there's like a section where he says certain people are blessed who you might not expect to be blessed. One of those people is blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are those who are overcome by loss, for they will be comforted. Let's look at another one. This is Luke's version of that same section. He kind of talks about something else that we might not expect to be blessed. Blessed are you who hunger now, for you will be satisfied. Blessed are you who weep now, for you will laugh. Those don't sound like blessed people to me. Those sound like people who are obsessed by what they don't have. It sounds like people who are stuck in I can't mode a little bit. But what is being said here, what Jesus is saying in both these verses is these people can be blessed. Let's look at a verse from Isaiah. This is a longer one. This one talks a lot about the kind of concepts we're talking about here. Isaiah 61, the Spirit of the sovereign Lord is on me because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted. This is kind of speaking through Jesus, sort of. To proclaim the freedom for the captives and to release from darkness for the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn. Last section, and well, maybe it's not. And provide for those who grieve in Zion, to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning. I think there's one more. And a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. They will be called oaks of righteousness. Oaks, a big, strong tree. They'll be called oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord for the display of his splendor. And what that verse says over and over again is when Jesus enters the equation, weak things become strong. When Jesus enters the equation, those I can'ts get overcome. The mourning and the sadness and the things that we struggle with, the things that are difficult, God enters the equation and gives us the strength to power through those things, to find strength we didn't know that we had. That's something that God can do for the downtrodden. That's something that God can do for those who call on him. And these verses are evidence of that. When Jesus came into the world, there were a ton of spiritual people who thought we have it all figured out. And if Jesus is who he says he is, he's got to be like this and this and this. And not only did Jesus challenge those assumptions about who he was, he looked straight at them and he said, the people who think they're already healthy don't need a doctor. The people who are sick do. And if you feel like me, and if you feel like you're saying I can't all the time, to the point where you feel sick, where you are inhibited by what you can't do, the message in those verses is that God blesses those who mourn, God blesses those who weep, and God gives strength to those who don't have the strength to do it themselves. And that's what's a great thing about him. So the lie we talked about this week was I can't. It's something that we say all of the time. God's truth for that lie, God's truth that conquers that lie, is that when we say I can't, we know that God will. God will. The things that we say we can't, God will. And there's a verse that kind of links along with this that Andrew pulled from the Psalms that I think is really, really powerful and helpful too. My flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. When we look at ourselves and when we are obsessed by our past failures, obsessed by our shortcomings, obsessed by the things that we can't do, that's when God swoops in with the strength that we need. That's when God helps us be better than we think we are. And that's what makes a huge, huge difference to us. And when we call upon God, we call upon the ability to save us when we couldn't save ourselves. The entire message of the Bible, if you really don't have the time to read the whole Bible and you want me to summarize it for you in the shortest section I possibly can, it's that at every chance to do things God's way, we chose our way and we pushed him away. But God loved us too much to let that relationship stay broken. So he sent his son into the world. His son died on the cross for our sins, paid the price we should have, and then rose 3 days later. And when he rose 3 days later, he made a promise to all of us that when we die, we'll rise 3 days later too. Well, not 3 days later. We'll rise with him. If we live for him and if we follow him, that resurrection that he had is a promise for us in the future. This is something Andrew also likes to talk about a lot. Instead of talking about the lies, he likes to talk about the promises. Here are the lies that we've been told. Here are the promises that God's given us that overcome those things. And this Psalm verse is really, really good for that. This verse that promises when you are weak and when you don't have the strength enough, God is the one who gives power to your heart to have a redemptive have a redemptive part of your story. I'm obsessed with stories. I watch movies all the time. Movies are like my favorite thing in the world. I could probably talk your ear off about any movie I'm in love with. I love to do it. It's something I'm excited about. I think one of the things that I really love when I read the Bible or love when I study ancient cultures, it's so easy when you read about people who lived thousands of years ago to think they are so different than us. There is nothing like us. Like there's nothing that crosses the bridge between us. But there's one thing I think is really interesting. Whenever I find something that's true about an ancient culture and still true today, that's something I always think is really, really fascinating. And you know what I love anytime I read about ancient cultures? They were obsessed with storytelling. When there was downtime, and they worked very hard in a lot of different eras, and a lot of times there wasn't downtime, but when they had downtime, they sat around a fire, or they sat at a home, or they sat at a synagogue, and they got in a circle, and they told stories. And it's one of those things, if you've ever seen like kids tell each other stories off like something they saw on TV or YouTube or something, one kid will be telling the story, and then if they get something wrong, another kid will correct them and like help them with the story, you know? Even if the first kid's not asking for help, which often happens too. And they work together, and sometimes they work together to make a story better than the original one they saw, you know? We love storytelling. That's one of my favorite things when I read that about ancient cultures. We may have changed so many things, language and hair and certainly fashion and certainly culture and certainly economics. All of these things have changed. One of the things that has stayed the same is we love stories. We love a good story. We love seeing our story reflected in a story. We love hearing a story and going, I get that. We love having something to kind of throw ourselves onto. So it's very, very hard for me to be in any public speaking engagement and not quote some kind of movie. But I'm a big Lord of the Rings fan. I hope you like Lord of the Rings too. If you don't, this is going to bore you to tears, but I hope you get something out of this. There's a speech in Lord of the Rings in the second movie when it's all about storytelling. There's a point where two characters are in a very, very, very dark, bad time, and they're thinking, how in the world do we get out of this? They're having a lot of I can'ts, all right? They know what they have to do, but they are thinking a lot about the I can'ts. And one of them is about to give up. And the other one rallies off this speech that I think about all of the time. And I want to link it in here in a second, but here's what he says. He says, it's like in the great stories. So here's a story about someone telling a story, which is even better. It's like in the great stories, Mr. Frodo, the ones that really mattered. Full of darkness and danger they were, and sometimes you didn't know the end because how could the end ever be happy? How could the world go back to the way it was when so much bad has happened? But in the end, it's only a passing thing, this shadow. Even darkness must pass. A new day will come, and when the sun shines, it will shine out all the clearer. Those were the stories that stayed with you, that meant something, even if you were too small to understand why. But I think, Mr. Frodo, I do understand. I know now. Folks in those stories had a lot of chances of turning back, only they didn't. I'm going to say that again because it's my favorite part, and I just kind of shivered a little bit because I love it so much. Folks in those stories had a lot of chances of turning back, only they didn't, because they were holding on to something. They were holding on to the fact that there's something good in this world, and it's worth fighting for. So that's just beautiful in general. But the thing I brought that up for is it's a story about stories, and the reason I think that that's particularly important. What are the stories we talk about and think about all the time? And maybe you're not into nerdy stuff like Lord of the Rings. Maybe you're a sports guy. What are the sports games and the famous games from history that you remember the most? Do you talk about the blowouts all the time? I think more often than not, we don't talk about the blowouts where the game was really easy and simple. We may have had more fun in the moment for those, but those aren't the legendary ones. You know what the legendary ones are? Where you're down a bunch and you rally. Where there's a moment in the game where you think it'd be really easy to throw in the towel and just like forfeit and move on to next week. Only they didn't. It's my favorite part of that whole quote. Folks could have given up, only they didn't. This is my favorite thing about storytelling. This is something that I think bridges the gap between eras, but I think it's something that resonates in that quote and resonates in our lives today. We love a good story, and most good stories have a dark point in it. Most good stories have a point where we think it's all over. That's called conflict. It's very, very difficult to go back to a story where there's no conflict. It's very, very easy. You're just watching someone be happy, which is nice. We need that too. But those aren't usually the stories we hang on to. We love a story where someone has a comeback. We love a redemption story. And guys, there's no one who loves redemption more than our God. There's no one whose story involves pulling someone from their mistakes more than God's story. If you don't believe me, I want you to look at some of the heroes that God has in his story. God needs a guy to lead his people out of slavery from Egypt. He needs to give a lot of big, powerful speeches to Pharaoh's officials, and his own people to motivate them to leave. Who does he pick? A guy with a speech impediment. Okay? God needs a king. God had one king. The guy's kind of messing up. He's not doing a very good job. God needs a second king to come in and be a really, really great king. He needs to be strong and powerful and big and a soldier. Who does he pick? The youngest kid in a shepherd family. That's who he picks to be the king when he needs someone big and strong and powerful. Someone too young to even operate in the military at the time. That's who he picks. He picks King David. Let's fast forward even further. God's people, Israel, are in a dark time. They've been conquered by other people, and they're really not following God very well. They need a brave and defiant, self-confident prophet to stand up to the foreign kings and say, here's what my God says. He needs to believe in himself. He needs to be really strong and self-assured. He needs to be okay operating alone because he's the only one following God. Let's pick someone who has depression, like Elijah. Let's pick someone who sits in a cave and says, God, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. But you look at these people, you look at Moses, you look at David, you look at Elijah, you look at, hey, Jesus comes to the world, he lives his life, and then he leaves in heaven and he leaves his disciples to run the church. Who should we pick to make the first big speech on behalf of our church? How about the guy who denied Jesus 3 times the time when Jesus was being killed? That sounds perfect, you know? Who better to talk about how great Jesus is than the guy who wanted nothing to do with him when he was about to die? Peter. How about let's move forward a little bit. We need someone to take the message of Jesus Christ outside of Israel. We need to take it to Greek-speaking cultures. We need to take it all to these other zones. Hey, here's a guy who killed the first Christian, who is responsible for the first Christian martyr. Let me say it that way. Let's find Paul. Let's make him the person who can take our message to the next level. So I bring up these stories because, one, I think the stories that we have to depend on are so important and so valuable to us. But the second thing I want you to notice is God has a pattern of using people who don't belong. God has a pattern of using people who don't seem like they fit. God has a pattern of using people who don't seem skilled correctly for the jobs that they have to do. And I want you to think about those people, and then I want you to look at yourself. Look at your failures. Look at your shortcomings. How can God use those things? How can God overcome those things? You know what one of the most important things was in the culture of the Bible? One of the most important things to your family structure was who got born first. The firstborn kid, and unfortunately, sorry women, the firstborn male in every family was really all that mattered. Those younger kids and any girl that was born, not important to the story. Unfortunately, that's the truth of the culture back then. So who do you think God uses consistently over and over again? He almost always uses the youngest kid in every story. If you read Genesis, it's always this person was born, and then like maybe even 10 kids later is the kid that the story's about. God loves using the unexpected. And I have a theory as to why. This isn't straight up written in the Bible anywhere, but here's my theory why. And God has used some people who you expect to be strong, but I think he really loves using people who you don't expect, because I think those are the people who learn they can't do it on their own. One of the most dangerous things we can do is to think that we are self-sufficient and to think that we don't need anybody's help and to think the world is better off with me just operating all by myself. And one of the best things that we need is to be able to admit, I can't do this on my own. Guys, who will ever accept Jesus' message if they don't accept that they can't do things on their own? So much of our message with Jesus is us admitting we have sinned, we have fallen short of the glory of God, we have made mistakes, and we need help that can only come from God. I think God loves using the downtrodden and the people who make mistakes and the people who have depression and the people who have anxiety and the people who have guilt and the people who have messed up in the past and the people who have gone to prison and people who have done terrible things in the past of their lives and people who struggle with guilt. I think God loves to use them because their story is one that says, and I couldn't do it by myself. And we love messages like that. We love stories like that. We love stories that come back from the brink. We love a comeback. I'm convinced that the reason I have depression is so I can talk to people and be able to tell people, guys, counseling is not something to be afraid of. Counseling is not something to be ashamed of. It turned my life around. And I'm convinced that if any good can possibly be squeezed out of that, it's that I can tell people how much it changed my life and how I believe anyone in this room who is even thinking about counseling would greatly benefit from it. It's the only thing I can think of to get past those feelings when I wake up and I despise the person that I am. It's the only good that I feel like I can get out of when I have a case of the I can'ts, when I'm convinced by all of my past failures that I will never succeed again. I don't know why I'm designed that way. I don't know why I'm wired that way. I don't know why those things come to my mind. I don't know why my brain does that. I'm trying to guess, and my guess is that someone else needs to hear it from someone who knows. Someone else needs to hear it from someone who's gone through the same thing. If there's someone here that's struggling with that, I just want you to know help is possible, improvement is possible. Not just because God loves us and cares about us and won't turn our backs on us, but because there are things in place for you to get the help you need. And I believe in that so much. And I believe it's the reason I struggle with it. I really do. And that's something that's so very important to me. Our God believes in redemption. Our God uses screwed up people. Our God uses people who've made mistakes. Our God uses people who agonize over the I can'ts. I'm just a huge believer in that. Andrew had a couple challenges he wanted to kind of walk through, things for you to kind of take with you whenever the lie of I can't is kind of taking over in your head. He have 4 things. Number 1 is put God first. Remember, he is strong when we are weak. Remember what I said about firstborn kids and firstborn kids in the Bible, where these are the people who might be tricked into thinking they're self-sufficient. When we trust God, we tell him, God, I can't do this on my own, and we ask him for help. So the first one's put God first. The second one's pursue God's truth. Remember the stories of redemption and read them. I gave you a couple of them today. There's a ton of stories of redemption in the Bible. More often than not, God uses the person you don't expect him to. Most of his disciples were illiterate, and they were working class people who could not read a scripture if it was put in front of their faces. If you are literate, you've got a leg up on Jesus' first disciples. I'm just saying, like there's a lot of potential for you, no matter how much we disqualify ourselves. God loves using the people that you think he cannot use. He wants you on his team, and his team is better with you on it. I truly believe that. But we have to learn to pursue his truth. We have to learn to read his stories and see how they apply to us and grow into them. Number 3 is prioritize the right voices. Please remember my story of like me being sure I could never do something and having everyone in my life, even the people I thought would doubt me, tell me I could do it. Surround yourselves with the people who believe in you. And sometimes believing in you means expecting more of you. And that's really important too. Find the people in your life who call you out and say, you're better than this thing you're doing. It might hurt to hear that. It might hurt to be called out. But if they love you enough to care about you and help you, and do it in the right way. A lot of people don't know how to admonish people in a healthy way. But if you have those people in your life, cling on to those people. Because having an honest person in your life, preferably grounded in the faith too, grounded in your same values, to help you grow and push back on the I can'ts is a super valuable thing. So prioritize the right voices that you hear. And a lot of that relates to self-talk too. When you make a mistake, don't call yourself stupid. Don't call yourself weak. Don't make a judgment over the person that you are. Say, I'm a person who made a mistake, but I'm still valuable. That's how God sees you, and that's how I hope you see yourself. And finally, participate in a healthy community. Kind of talked about this already. Find your people. Find your people who build you up. Find your people who make you better. Find your people who will call you out. Find your people who will love you. Find your people who have your back. I say it all the time. Following Jesus is not an individual sport. It's a team sport. A lot of people just think, I love Jesus. I don't need to go to church. I don't need to meet others. I'll just follow Jesus all by myself in my house. And I'm not saying that's impossible. I'm saying they're doing themselves a detriment in doing it. Following Jesus is a team sport. We're all so much stronger together than we are by ourselves. Those are the things I really wanted to focus on. I took Andrew's message and kind of tried to make it my own and tried to share some of my stories that kind of link in with that. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to pray for us really quick. What we always do is we do a prayer here where I'll pray and everyone in the room will just kind of repeat after me as I pray. If you've never prayed a prayer to God before, feel free to just pray along with me. There'll be other people praying, so your voice will blend in with the others. It won't be awkward, I promise. We're going to pray affirming the most important decision, which is a decision to follow Jesus Christ. And then we're going to pray a little bit about trusting God over the doubts that we have. And I hope you'll pray this with me today. So everyone repeat after me. Dear God, thank you for loving us. Thank you for caring about us so much. Your son died for us on the cross, and he raised from the dead, and he promised the same for us if we follow you. And God, I want to follow you. Help me with the doubts. Help me with the I can'ts. Help me with the things I say in my mind that disqualify myself. Help me know that you are stronger than me. Help me know that I can do great things with you with me. Help me to remember how much you care about me. Help me to forgive myself. Help me to heal. Help me to seek you and get healthy. Thank you for all that you've done for me. In your name.